Hey, 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 welcome back to the Email Mojo Dojo. I'm so happy you're here. We are actually going to be going into writing tips today. You probably say, oh, look at that Sego's finally going to show us how to write some emails 7 weeks in. So, for the formal topic today is Mind Movies and Writing Mojo. So, yep, we're going to be talking about some writing tips today, but I want to put this into perspective, just because it's been a while since we talked about it. We talked about it at the beginning of the course. But the purpose of our writing to make it enjoyable and readable is just that, to make it enjoyable and for the reader. And it's the emotional payoff for the reader to continue listening or dialing in or tuning in to us or opening our emails and reading them. But only 10% of our sales success is actually going to come from the actual writing itself, give or take 10%. So I would say that, just because the heart only takes up a small percentage of the amount of our body, it still is important, and it's important for our readers so that they have an emotional payoff and it's fun to read our email. So we're going to talk about how to do that today, but it's not so much about convincing. It's not about convincing people and arm wrestling them to purchase our services as much, because most of that's done by understanding the people and positioning of the offer, which we've talked at length about. But this is the icing on the cake, the writing tips. So let's go ahead and roll in here. So I'm going to give you a really, really simple one. And most of these writing tips are simple. Some of them are simple and easy, but this one it falls into both categories, simple and easy. I call this like the grammar school or junior high tip, because we can literally have any sixth grader come in and edit our copy for this and make it more powerful. And that is to include as many you, your, and you are statements inside of our writing. So very often we'll read, I'll read some writing, it's all I and we, and in third person, he or she. And as much as we can, we want to move that into you statements. Instead of saying, I'm going to show you, you're about to see, right? You're about to see. You're about to experience. Don't say my program, right? Especially if we're on the G3 order form or we are closing. Say your program, right? Go ahead and put it into their hands. So as you're going to see, as you go through your new program, right? Say, I'm going to use yours and yours we put in there. We want this chock full of you, your, and your. So go through and as much as we can take out the I's, the we's, the he's, and the she's and put in the you, your, and your. So I just opened up an email and it's actually from Nissan. This may not be the world's best example, but it's from Nissan because I have two Nissans. So they sent me an email letting me know that the 2017 Nissan Rogue is available. And they just have basically a paragraph of copy, and it says the new 2017 Nissan Rogue is now available at a Nissan dealer near you. That's the first you right there. It's all about them, you. Check out the features that will help make everyday life easier and build your new Rogue now. So what they could do is they could say, hey, Travis, and of course this is kind of a tip outside of the you, your, but hey, Travis, if you've been waiting to feast your eyes on the new 2017 Nissan Rogue, you'll be happy to know it's available now at a Nissan dealer near you. See how much better, and I'm just winging this off the top of my head. See how much better that is, though? If you want to check out the features that will make your everyday life easier and build your new Rogue now, check out the links below, right? So just by infusing that with you, your, and your makes it so much more powerful and so much more interesting for the reader, because now they are inside of our movie. This moves us down to the next tip. This is probably the overarching tip or theme that I want you to take away from this. Our job in our writing, as far as giving people emotional payoff, is we want to create mind movies. Mind, I hope I'm enunciating the D well enough. Mind, M-I-N-D, movies. So we are a producer and a director, and we want our writing to be laden with action and laden with them inside of a movie. So we want to put them into the action. We want to use action verbs and verbs that make mental pictures. We don't want to use words that don't create pictures. The easier the word is to create a picture, the more powerful and emotional payoff they're going to get for reading your copy. So this is kind of, use a real quick example. I could say felt throbbing pain in his chest. That's not awful. Because we've kind of all maybe experienced some throbbing pain before. We kind of can put a picture of what chest means, but we can make it even more powerful, right? And say karate chopped in the heart, right? Karate chopped in the heart, that's action, right? It's like, it felt like it was a karate chop right to the heart. So that's more of an action movie that's taking place. So very often what I do in copy is I look at where they're using words that do not make action or do not convey action or do not make a mind movie. And somebody said, I don't really know if I shared with you guys, but I was working with a client, and one of the things he kept saying in his copy, because one of the things he does is help people pre-sell their products before they actually build the whole thing out. They do pilot programs. But he kept saying the word pre-sell in his copy. Let me ask you, does the word pre-sell easily evoke any mental picture? Not really, right? We might have something, because we kind of have to force it. What is the pre-sell? What is kind of a picture does that mean? So, but what does evoke pictures, and this is still probably not perfect, is the word launch. We understand launches. We can kind of see a launch in our mind, but it's not quite clear. So we added a word to it, because what he really does is do quiet launches, right? It's a quiet little launch, just a little launch, quiet little launch, right? So even that is not the perfect mind movie, but it's way more vivid and clear and gives a perspective on what he does. And it helps them tie it to something that they already understand, right? It's hard to understand like pre-selling something, but it's easier to understand launch. We've seen lots of launches. We know they're big and ruckus, and if they don't go right, they're very stressful. So we can say the quiet little launch. So the end result is he was really, really struggling with using the words pre-sell. But just changing those words, the quiet little launch, people got it. It did lead to more sales, which I'm trying not to say words lead to the sales. But as a really great example, if they get it and they can dial it in, it's way more powerful. So part of what we always want to do is like, if the product name, and it's really even more important in product names, what we do, are we creating a movie in their mind? If we had to direct a scene, would these words help them direct that scene, right? So I'm working on naming something right now, and I'm still working on it, but I'm just going to share it with you. I'm working on a concept called insight-based marketing. But I'm realizing that insight doesn't really conjure up a mental movie or a mind movie. So I'm going to probably test it out, but I'm playing with calling it aha-based marketing, because we all kind of like, usually I would say we said aha or a light bulb-based marketing, right? The light bulb comes on an aha-based marketing. What I'm trying to do is like make the mental picture, make the mind movie. At the core of this, everything we're trying to do is make that mind movie, put it into something people can understand. So I just did a Facebook post. The idea came to me on a walk. It was on Halloween. So I kind of wanted to use the Halloween theme a little bit. I was talking about Frankenfunnels, the return of Frankenfunnels. I started out with, hey, if you were to look at our little industry, you would think that at the heart, we can see heart, right? At the heart of a lucrative and thriving business is a funnel. You would think that, looking at that. But ask any business owner that's actually running a lucrative, thriving business, and what he'll tell you is at the heart of his business is a customer. And then I take the mind movie even farther, and we talk about blood and circulation, but it's all very metaphorical and it's something that they can see. If we were creating a movie or a cartoon out of it, we could actually draw that out. So let's kind of move into the actual email right away. The next tip is get into the action right away, as soon as you can. So what I want to point out to this is remembering that there are several sales that we make. The first sale we make when we're using Email Mojo is to see our name and want to read the subject line. So most people start at the subject line, right? That's not really the first sale we made. The first sale is made is to see our name and to say, oh, it's that Travis Sago guy or that T.W. Jackson guy or that Lee Bacham guy. I wonder what he's got to say, right? So part of the actual writing is, again, to get them to say, I have an enjoyable time. Then our next sale is the subject line. We want them to read the subject line, and our next sale is to get them to open, right? So we've talked at length at subject lines and what we should put in there. But now that they open the email, our next sale is to get them to read the whole email, right? That's our next sale. We want to get them to read the whole email. And part of the trick and the magic to that is getting into the action right away. And they talk about this a lot if you're writing fiction or writing a novel, is that you want to start out getting into the action right away. So I picked out a couple examples. One is mine, a couple of other examples. But one of the ones that I used, the content of the email was about using ingenuity and resourcefulness. I had done some studying on prison systems and what they call the SHU, which is the Secure Housing Unit, and how resourceful and ingenious the prisoners are in the SHU. They spend millions, if not billions of dollars trying to make it the most secure housing unit possible. They take away everything from these prisoners, but yet they still get a communication network going, because one of the things they can't take away from them is their clothes. So they'll take and unravel the elastic in their underwear or the string in their t-shirts, and they will write little notes. They'll put little notes on there and they'll slide it underneath their cell over to somebody else, and then somebody else will grab onto it with their string, and pretty soon you get this whole cobweb of different things, and they pass notes around to each other. So here's kind of my opening line to that. It was, don't be alarmed. Now, as soon as I say don't be alarmed, what's the first thing you do? You say, right? It captures your time. Because it's a danger thing. So don't be alarmed. But as you're reading this, a prison inmate is plotting out his next murder. So that's kind of okay, I'm going to read this, right? I'm kind of moving right into the action there. So that's one of my examples. I'm going to read just two more examples from some other books. So this one is from a book called Paradise, written by Toni Morrison. And it starts out, they shoot the white girl first. It's wow, you got to know what happens after that, right? There's one called The Crow Road by, I think it's Ian Banks. And it says, it was the day my grandmother exploded. So really a mental picture right there, mind movies, right? We don't what happened? My grandmother exploded. What does that mean? She got mad? Did she really explode? Why were they shooting the white girl? Why was she going first? Who is they? So it opens up a lot of things, right? But we're going to move right into the action. Very often when I read my copy or read somebody else's copy as well, we can chop off the first few paragraphs because sometimes it takes that warm up to get right into the action. So very often what I find myself doing in my copy or other people's copy is you really start getting, the good stuff starts coming down in paragraph 3 or paragraph 4. So we can a lot of times just eliminate all the stuff at the beginning, and then it starts kind of getting into the action. So let's move on to the next tip here. This one is somewhat related to the Mind Movies, but I like to re-point it out. It's one of the number one tips if you're writing a screenplay or you're writing a book that they give you. So I thought I would be remiss if I didn't bring it out, and it makes a point in a really great way. But don't tell people something in your writing when you can show them. You could tell somebody that a woman was depressed, she was depressed, or that you were depressed, right? Or your client was depressed. But that's telling. So how do we show that? Again, we do it with a mind movie. Like if we had to make a movie out of she was depressed, what would that look like? What would that feel like? What would that smell like? And again, kind of the secret to making these is using the five senses if you haven't gathered. So I just whipped this up off the top of my head, but she slogged through the house, foul-smelling and unbathed for 2 days, and made her way to the refrigerator so she could devour the last quart of Haagen-Dazs with extreme prejudice. There's lots of other ways we could do depressed. I was writing a VSL once for the breakup thing. It started out, I'm going to do it from the best I can from memory. It started out clink, clink as Tom had dropped two ice cubes and poured himself his third scotch on the rocks, right? So obviously it's like, wow, something's wrong, right? Something's going on. His third scotch on the rocks. We started right with the action, clink, clink, and he poured his third glass of scotch for the night. So something was happening. We're showing them rather than telling them. We move into the next tip. Sometimes I get accused of using NLP. I know what NLP is. I don't know that I really try to use it much. I do try to bring people into the future, especially if we're in the selling mode. I try to bring them into the future and like what the NLP calls future pacing, I guess. But I also like to use the power of questions, because if I can get them to come to an implicit decision on their own instead of me having to tell them, then it's that much more powerful. So I like to use questions. Instead of stating, you should get started today, we can say, how soon do you want to see your first book on Amazon? Or how soon do you want to see the result that you want to get, right? Or if we're helping people make sales, when would you like to start making those extra sales? We want them to say right now, right? But if we say act now, it's not as powerful as if we use a question. We can tell somebody it's going to feel great when he slips that ring on your finger. We tell a wife, it's going to feel so great when he slips that engagement ring on your finger. Or we can ask them, how would it feel? What would be the first thing that goes through your mind if you were to get down, kneel down on one knee, and with his hands trembling, slide the engagement ring on your finger, and with a crackle in his voice, he says, will you marry me? What would that be like, right? And let them come and answer that, right, in their own mind and in their own head. So I like to use questions. So what I do is I look for anywhere that I'm making a statement about how I'd like them to feel or how they should feel, and say, how can I turn that into a question? You want to be a little bit careful with it, because questions can be powerful, because when you ask somebody a question, they feel naturally compelled. We feel naturally compelled to answer them, even if there's like nobody else there. So we want to be careful that we don't ask questions that move the golf ball further from the hole, right? If you say, why wouldn't you do this? This is so awesome. Why wouldn't you do it? They're going to come up with reasons why they wouldn't want to do it, which is exactly a lot of times the opposite of what you want. So you want to make sure that your questions that you ask will help them to make a decision, right? Can you see the advantages to asking a question like that? So there, I just did it right there. Can you see the advantages to asking a question like that? I could say, how many advantages could you come up with to asking a question like that? That might be a little bit clunky, but I think you can see where I'm going with this. Or I could say, can you see where I'm going with this? Yeah, I can see where you're going with it. As a fun little, I'm not saying to do this, but as a fun little thing, sometimes I will send some short emails, and I'll see if I can put more questions in there than statements. It's a fun little exercise that I do. Instead of saying, hey, this is T-Dub coming in to visit with you. Hey, this is T-Dub, how much did you miss me? Right? Hopefully, asking that, they say, well, they have to think about how much they miss me, right? So I'll ask, like, questions, and just for, it's fun. I'm not saying I recommend for everybody to do it, but sometimes I'll ask more questions than I do statements. Could be very, very powerful. This next tip is kind of 2 tips in one. This one is, we might have to do some review on this, but we talked about the 3 programs that play, especially when we're in sales mode, that play inside of our everybody's head, the child, the adult, and the parent. And we talked about the 2 tones that we wanted to use in our writing, which is 70% of the time we want to be speaking as a nurturing parent, which is the caring, the loving, and I understand parent, and 30% of the time we want to be speaking as the adult, which is just the very logical. In fact, doesn't it make sense that, and we're just stating facts and cases. So 70% of the time we want to be speaking as nurturing parent, 30% of the time as adult. What we want to watch for, unless we're highly, highly skilled in the art of writing and viewpoint, is we want to make sure that we're not writing as critical parent. We don't want to write as a critical parent. And it's very, very easy to slip into sometimes without meaning to do it, and to kind of get into a judgmental mode and to be, in a sense, not that we do it on purpose, but to end up shaming somebody when we don't want to shame them. So I'm trying to give a really great example really quickly. So like in one of my BSLs, I don't want to say, hey, I'm talking to women that want to start a family, but they feel like the clock is ticking, right? So how do I say that in a nurturing parent kind of way? Hey, you don't say, hey, if you're getting older and you're worried the clock's running out on you, you better take some action right now, right? That's kind of like critical parent, right? It's like, oh, you're telling me what I should do or I shouldn't do. But I think the way I stated it was like, hey, if the last time you blew out the candles on your birthday cake, there's a few more candles than you really would have liked. That was kind of the way that I handled the age thing in a gentle way. One of my big tips for detecting critical parent is so diabolically simple that most people won't do it, but it's the easiest way to catch critical parent. It's also the easiest way to catch things that don't make sense in your copy, and that is to read your copy out loud. That sounded like critical parent. As I said that sounded like critical parent right there. So you want to read your copy out loud, and kind of catch, like, is this sounding blamey? Is this sounding like I'm telling them what they should do? Or does it come across as I'm saying they're not intelligent if they don't take the actions or don't consider what I'm telling them? And then you want to reframe it or reword it in a way that it's nurturing parent, right? So the big example I see of this is in the kind of the biz op industry. If you're serious about X, if you're serious about working from home, then you definitely need to be on our webinar. That's very like critical parent, right? One way to handle it is make the enemy not them and their willpower or how motivated they are, but get into an understanding of all the other things that they have going on that could be competing for their time, right? So again, we want to stay conversational, but I could say, hey, this is Travis here. Don't know if you heard, question mark, using the you. Don't know if you heard, but we're putting on a big shindig. And you might not say shindig, but that's kind of what I do. I'm putting on a big shindig tonight where you learn the hottest niches of 2017 for Amazon, right? So and there's very, very little competition. Now listen, I know that I'm putting this on at 6 p.m. You're probably just getting home. You've got the kids to feed and you've got the laundry to do. And it's going to be an investment of your time to jump on with me. Here's why I think that you might want to, it might help you to, I don't know how much say. Here's why I think that it might make sense to rearrange your schedule a little bit, if you can, right? but just kind of recognizing that it's not that they're lazy ass slugs that never take any action, but they have other things going on, and they may not realize the importance or what you're talking about, right? So if we read some of this stuff out loud, we can kind of catch that stuff and see how it sounds to our ear. And it's probably one of the easiest ways to catch when we're like moving into critical parent mode. Sometimes I give you the tip about the you, your, and your. This would sometimes be the antithesis or the opposite of this tip. If the you sounds blamey or the you sounds critical parent. So we were talking about the headlines like make love with the lights on, but the hell island is making love with the lights off. So it might be a little blamey to say in a subject line, it's like, hey, you have to make sure the lights are turned off before you make love, right? Because what we're saying is, hey, are you fat? Are you uncomfortable with your body? Which could come off as a little bit critical, right? So how does this person know? He can't see me. But if we can talk about it, a tip to this is we can talk about it either coming from us. This would be a time we'd want to talk about it coming from us if it was our experience, or maybe coming from somebody else, right? So I just did a subject line that said she could only make love. She could only make love when the lights were turned off, right? Now that allows people that resonate with her to open that, but it doesn't say, hey, I know that you're not comfortable with your body. So it moves away from that critical parent. So read that stuff out loud. It's a little tip for maneuvering when you don't want to go into critical parent, right? So very often, like if I'm talking about, motivation, I'll reach back into a lot of times when I didn't feel motivated and maybe talk about a story when I didn't feel motivated rather than what unmotivated slugs my people are, right? Because they're not unmotivated slugs. Like anything else, they have a priority system. And sometimes that priority system gets confused, right? It happens naturally. But again, so we just want to come from the nurturing parent in writing tips, and people will feel like you're on their side. The biggest tip to that is to be on their side, right? If you're on their side, they're going to feel like you're on their side, and your writing is going to come across. But it's still easy to trip up, so read your copy out loud. I'm making a big to-do about this because so often, I said, did you read your copy out loud? No. I know, so please go read your copy out loud. I know it's hard to do. And again, what am I doing? I say, I know sometimes that I don't read my copy out loud, and that's a mistake, right? Instead of saying, hey, you should read your copy out loud, right? So I'm kindly suggesting you read your copy out loud. I'm going to move into the last tip here, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this, but I actually, in the pre-training, and I keep referring to this pre-training because it's so powerful, but I think it may even make more sense in this context now. But in the pre-training, there's a pre-training called Please Take My Money. Some of this is persuasion, but it also goes under the copy or the writing enjoyment and emotional payoff and believability camp. But I call it the pendulum swing. We want to keep people in a neutral emotional state. We want to keep swinging. We don't want to keep them there, but we want to keep swinging the pendulum back to a neutral state. So anytime we get too positive in our copy, especially if we're espousing them buying or taking an action that we want them to, we might want to swing the pendulum back towards the negative side. And likewise, if we're talking about something that could be construed negative, like a price or an investment, then we want to swing the pendulum back to the positive side. What we're really doing is we're adjusting where they're putting their attention. And we want their attention to swing back and forth because that makes it enjoyable. But I'm using neutral, not that we want them to read it all deadpan and unemotionally, but we want to keep an idea of where neutral is. Because if we get them too excited, I'm mentioning too excited, the copy is going to come off as hypey and unbelievable. And of course, when their attention goes to the time investment or the monetary investment or something that we'll have to invest in order to get the results that they want, we want to swing that back to what they're going to gain from it. So I would refer you back to the Please Take My Money training, but I just wanted to cover that here. Let's talk about a couple examples. This works brilliantly well in conversation as well as it does in writing. And of course, your writing, the more it comes off as conversational, the more people are going to enjoy reading it because it should be coming off as a conversation. But I was having a chat with a girl that was considering coming into the same course that you're in right now. And I was stacking benefit on top of benefit. And I took a look at that, and I'm like, I'm really swinging the pendulum to the positive side here. And I just literally said this. I said, I've told you a lot of good things, but let me rub some of the shiny off. I'm not saying you'll say that. I'm not saying you have to say it in the copy, but let me rub some of the shiny off. You will have to sit down and write for at least 15 to 30 minutes a day. You don't have to be a great writer, but you can't hate writing. If you hate writing, this is not going to be a great fit for you. Now, the interesting thing, as soon as I go negative like that, the human tendency is her attention wants to pull it back to neutral. She's off, or not. Maybe she would say, oh yeah, I hate writing. This is totally not going to be a good fit for me. But she's like, you know what, Travis, I actually really enjoy writing. I'd much rather write for 15 or 30 minutes a day than get on the phone for an hour or 2 hours every day, right? So that's an example of swinging the pendulum back when you've gone too positive, right? It's actually more powerful if you can get the negative if you have like a negative thing, to get it out of the way up front. If I was to write copy, more early, if it's in the email, I'd say, hey, if you don't mind writing, you don't have to like it. If you don't mind writing for 15 or 30 minutes a day, that's kind of the big drawback to this whole process. Is you have to write for 15, 30 minutes a day, but we could bring it out up front. Start with a negative and then stack the positive. It even makes it more powerful. They talk about this a lot. It's like the Hertz, or is it Avis? I can't remember now. Darn my memory. But when they come out, they said, hey, we're number 2, right? Damaging emission, or the negative. So we try harder, right? The Volkswagen Bug was kind of the same thing. It was kind of an ugly car. But so they just got that, they just admitted it, like, hey, the ugliest car, but we also do X, Y, and Z, right? So you can start out with a negative and swing it back to the positive. The other thing you want to do when it comes to the pendulum is realize that anytime you talk about cost, whether that cost is pulling out your wallet, pulling out your credit card, what have you, or investment in time, any time of effort or investment in money, time, effort, sweat, blood, tears, their attention is going to move to that. Now, the most ethical thing that I think we can do to help somebody make a decision is also help them counterbalance what it's costing them not to make that investment. And many, many times that counterbalance is way more expensive than where their focus is at. Now, if it's not, they're not going to do business, and that's totally fine. But we want to swing that pendulum back. So I really learned a lot about this, and forgive me if I'm restating what I stated, and please take my money. But I really learned a lot of this doing fundraising for the Special Olympics. And so we call like complete strangers, or maybe some of them had given money the previous year or previous years, but we pretty much call complete strangers in the community where Special Olympics was going to take place. And when we got to them to the point of telling them the different levels of investment, we made a couple of discoveries. So we would do it like this. We'd say, James or Mr. James, there's 3 levels of investment that you can invest in this year. And so we have a bronze level, which is $25, which will send 1 kid to the Special Olympics. We have a silver level, which is $50, which will send 2 kids to the Special Olympics. Or if you really want to be a hero to these kids, you can step up to the gold for $100, which will send 5 kids to the Special Olympics this year. And so here's the critical point. Right now, their focus is on the $25, $50, or $100. They're like, do I have that much? Do I want to write a check for that much? Or whatever that might be. That's where their focus is at. So when we would close it by saying, where can we count on your support? We did okay, and people would give us money. But we found out by swinging the pendulum back to something positive about what it's going to mean, we could double and triple not only the amount, but the quantity of donations. So here's what it kind of sounded like. Instead of saying, where can we count on your support? After we gave them the levels, Mr. James, we've got 3 levels of support. We got bronze, which is $25. We'll send one special young person to the Special Olympics. We've got the silver, which is $50, and that will send 2 children. Or if you can find it in your heart and your pocketbook to go for the gold, which is $100. That'll send 5 kids to the Special Olympics. And then we would swing the pendulum back, and we'd say, this is the one day a year that these kids can get out there and they can compete and they can feel like any other normal kid with no hand holding. They just get out there and they compete as hard as they can, and they can get out there and know that they can do things and be part of society. And I think that's so important. Their parents think it's important, and it changes these kids' lives. Mr. James, where can we count on your support? And so by swinging that pendulum back, massive things, I don't remember the exact numbers, but just massive things for our donations. So the same thing, when you talk about, I've got this new course coming out, you'll have to, the negative part is you're going to have to invest 3 hours a week along with the financial investment. But here's what it may be really costing. You wouldn't say it like that, but here's what we're really going to do. We're going to swing the pendulum back, right? I need to change it on the G3 order form example that you have, because we just started doing this. I'm like, why don't we do this around the order buttons, right? So around the order buttons in the G3 order form, right where they're hovering over, and their focus is on, oh gosh, this is a $2,000 investment or a $5,000 investment or a $6,000 investment. That's where their focus at. We want to have this pendulum swing around by the buttons. And you have to do it different ways depending on what you're selling. But basically, so if it was like a monetary thing, we could say our goal, so we had a Facebook advertising program that we were selling. So we right down by the buttons, we said, our goal for you in the first month is to earn $2 for every dollar that you spend in Facebook ads. I think we tried different things. We extrapolated out. Our first goal for you is to get to $100 a day in profit. Now, we didn't say promise, guarantee. That's our first goal for you, right? That allowed us to swing the pendulum back, as they're looking at a $2,000 investment, and they're also at the same time saying our first goal for you is $100 in profit a day. That's a good trade-off, right? That's a good trade-off. Oh, if I can spend $2,000 to get $100 a day in profit, that's a great trade-off, right? So it's a great place to swing the pendulum back in the writing. Plus, it makes it enjoyable when, not so much there, but in your writing, if you're swinging the pendulum back from, boy, they're really positive, and then you let them come back and do their own swinging of the pendulum, it gets them involved and gets them into the activity. So that is the last writing tip.